Hello, Buff fans. Troy and I are back with another episode of the CU Sports Report podcast. It's the bye week. Well, the end of the bye week. They're playing Texas Tech this weekend, and it was a very successful bye week with Texas Tech beating number 11 Iowa State and Kansas State taking a loss to Houston. And now Colorado is tied for second in the Big 12 with a pretty clear path to the Big 12 championship. Also, the CFP rankings came out. The Buffs are number 20 out of top 25, and the things are looking good for Colorado. It was Travis Hunter went to the big noon kickoff, kind of unofficially launched his Heisman campaign, and overall, it's as good as a bye week as you can have for not playing football. What were your reactions to the CFP rankings?
Um, yeah, the rankings were interesting. The rankings like CU obviously at number 20. I think the AP has them at 21. The rankings were really similar to the AP, pretty much top to bottom. But I think the biggest takeaway for CU in the rankings is that there's not really a path in other than winning the Big 12. I think we all kind of knew that already. But the rankings were kind of confirmation of that. There's so many SEC and Big Ten teams up near the top of the rankings that those teams are going to take a majority of the at-large spots. Maybe the ACC gets two teams, but even BYU, who is, in my opinion, was the most disrespected team in the rankings. Undefeated. They've got a top 20 win over SMU, who's ranked 13th right now. They've got a top 20 win over Kansas State, who's ranked 19th right now. And BYU still couldn't land higher than number 9. So I think that kind of tells you what the committee thinks of the Big 12. You mentioned the path that CU has after the bye week to make the Big 12 championship game. I think they will need one more Iowa State loss. But top of the priority list is CU's got to get 4 wins in the next 4 weeks. And if they do that, I think in all likelihood, they will get to head to Arlington with a chance to win the conference.
Get an auto bid. Who's the matchup going to be? Is it me BYU in Colorado? I guess
I
we'll
think
see.
BYU is probably going to be the in the championship game.
Yeah,
Their
at this
schedule is
rate.
pretty. The only team left in the conference that's undefeated, and their schedule. I'm live podcasting. I'm pulling up right now. They do play at Utah, which is a big rivalry game this weekend, so that's a
Mm.
tough one. But home Kansas, at Arizona State, and then Houston. So, at
Oh.
ASU's tough, at Utah's tough, but there are more difficult iterations of a possible Big 12 schedule down the stretch. So I think BYU should be feeling pretty good about themselves. And then the second spot, obviously the CU, we'll get into CU and Texas Tech. That's a big game for that second spot. Kansas State's still right there. Iowa State's got just one loss. So it's going to be a tight, fun race down the last month of the season here.
Yeah, we'll see how everything shakes out, but it could be a potential tiebreaker because Kansas plays Iowa State, right?
Yes, I think Kansas is going to have a pretty big say in this. I think they play Iowa State this week, BYU next week, and then CU the week after that. So Kansas is gonna Kansas is an important figure in this race, even if they're not necessarily in it themselves. Kansas is better than their record, though. That's a tough game for all. Kansas has had they're 2-6, and they've had a fourth quarter lead in 7 games. And the eighth game, they had a lead, I think, in the last 2 or 3 minutes of the third quarter. So it's not like Kansas has just been getting walked over by all these teams. So, that's a game that you've got to get up for. But we'll see if they can pull off an upset against any of these teams down the stretch. Hopefully
Yeah,
not you, but we'll see.
certainly formidable. Yeah, Kansas is better than their resume shows, but I guess they're unable to close games. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. I'm going to Kansas City. Very excited for that game. But very productive bye week, as I mentioned. On the recruiting side, we'll get into a couple of recruiting notes that I have for the week. Not too much action other than a guy I mentioned a couple weeks ago, 4-star athlete. He's the number one athlete in Texas, 17th ranked prospect in the 2026 class. Keyshawn Henderson. He's still committed to Houston, but the way that Houston season's going, his recruiting's kind of up in the air, and SMU and Colorado are his main flip targets at the moment. 2025 IMG Academy five-star Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng. Michigan is still the favorite, but Colorado and Texas are still in the mix to potentially flip him. And Colorado has definitely been in contact and trying to persuade them to come to a beautiful Boulder. And also in the Julian Lewis atmosphere, he did not visit Indiana over the weekend, despite reports. National recruiting analyst Adam Gorney said he will not be visiting Indiana this weekend. So seems like USC, Indiana was that one last school that was still kind of trailing, but it seems like USC and Colorado are the final two on his radar. So all those recruiting notes for this week, and I think we'll definitely see more as there will be visitors at the Utah game and the last home game against Oklahoma State. The season goes by so fast. It's like, where does all this time go? But this
Already
season has,
snowing.
I know it's. I
It's
hope I'm
already.
flying on a very small plane to Texas Tech. I was talking to Troy before this, and I don't want to jinx it, and I usually do, but prayers up for me and this flight making it to Midland, Texas. Brian Howell, Nigel Amstock, and I will all be taking a road trip to Lubbock. It's really hard to get there, so one way or another, I will hopefully get to Lubbock this weekend. um, we'll hop into Texas Tech and that game this weekend. Of course, it's all these games for November are very pivotal for Colorado to sneak into that Big 12 championship and maybe have some CFP repercussions depending on how things shake out. But Texas Tech has been one of those teams. It's where their defense on paper, they're allowing 462.1 yards per game and they're 128th in FBS. So they're really, really bad. But they're coming off a game against Iowa State where they held them to just 22 points and came out with a really close win. And they've been winning out a lot this year. I mean, they're 6-3, yeah, 6-3 and 4-2 in the conference. Their offense pretty balanced. Of course, they got Taj Brooks, 1,047 rushing yards this season. They're able to pass the ball well, but sometimes it's sometimes their offense does fall flat in some areas. Their offensive line is good. There's multiple facets of this team that's like, okay, they're they're able to work with what they have, and they've been able to escape with some close wins this season. When you look at, well, I guess we'll start with Texas Tech's offense. You mentioned Taj Brooks, but when you look at this offense, how balanced are they, and what can their quarterback Beren Morton do in the air and on the ground?
Yeah, this is a good unit. CU's going to have to be on alert. I think this is a unit up there with some of the better offenses that CU has played. You know, they played against Kansas State was a pretty good offense. That's kind of an easy comparison with the kind of things that they like to do. Texas Tech is a little bit more spread out than Kansas State was. Um, and that's because Baron Morton is a better pure pocket passer than Avery Johnson. I don't think he has the wheels on him that Johnson did. But Baron Morton will run, especially like third downs, some short yardage. They like to use it more as a changeup than kind of like the main diet. The main diet in the running game is obviously Taj Brooks, who is one of the best backs in the country, one of the best backs that CU will play against all year. Um, big guy can get downhill. He's very, very patient. Really is very good at letting his blocks develop, letting the play develop, and then has really good burst getting up through the hole and getting upfield. CU linebackers coach Andre Hart yesterday compared him to Le'Veon Bell from the NFL. There's also been a lot of comparisons. I think Hart and I think Levante Bentley compared him to DJ Giddens as well. And CU didn't have a very fun time against DJ Giddens, so they'll be wise to have a better day against Taj Brooks. Tackling is going to be really, really big for CU. Taj Brooks is kind of similar to Giddens. He forces a lot of missed tackles, very shifty in the hole. And Texas Tech mixes up their schemes. They do some zone stuff. They do a lot of guard pull, tackle pull, some GT stuff. They pull the tight end around sometimes. So they do a lot of cool stuff in the running game. They also do a lot of RPOs, which Morton gets a ton of easy completions because you look at Texas Tech, what do you want to do? You want to put guys in the box, bring a safety down into the box. And Baron Morton has the authority on a lot of those plays to pull the ball, throw screens, throws hitches, throws slants. So they get a lot of quick completions that way. That kind of helps them stay ahead of the schedule, and it also keeps the defense honest. That's a really big part of their offense. When they do throw the ball, CU fans, you guys will be familiar with Josh Kelly, the number one target. He played for Washington State last season. He had 130 yards in the CU Washington State game that I'm sure none of you want to remember. Um, so he's a really good receiver, really good slot receiver, can make plays down the field, can make plays after the catch. He's very, very reliable underneath. He had a big game against Iowa State last week. Um, and then the other thing about Baron Morton in the passing game, he really trusts himself and he really trusts his receivers. If you give him a one-on-one chance on the outside, which I'm sure CU is going to do a lot, as they like to do, he's going to take it. He's going to give his guys chances to make plays. He's going to give his guys chances to draw penalties. He will let it rip over the middle into a tight window. He really trusts his arm and he really trusts his guys to make catches. So yeah, they can get it done through the air. They can get it done on the ground. This is a good unit, and they uh, usually put up a lot of points. So it'll be a big challenge for the CU defense and Robert Livingston this week.
Yeah, when we were talking to Coach Hart yesterday, I asked him what's the biggest challenge with this team, and that they run a lot of tempo. So it's going to be up to his defense to get settled in, get set up pre-snap, so they can keep up with the pace that this offense runs at. When you look at tempo offenses, ultimately, what's the biggest difference between maybe a regular offense? It's the pace, it's the speed, but what makes it difficult from a defensive perspective going up against a tempo team?
The hardest thing about playing against tempo is that they make you very vanilla, and it makes them it gives them a look where if you're going to be in just base stuff a lot because of the tempo, because you don't have time to communicate and line up and all of this different stuff, then they know what you're going to do and they can attack that. That's where they get a lot of these RPOs because they're in tempo. Teams are just going to line up with, hey, four down front, two linebackers. We're going to just sit in a cover two or sit in a cover three or sit in a man. And you can't really, it's hard to disguise that stuff when the other team is moving so fast. So then Baron Morton gets up to the line and he looks and he says, hey, I've got single high, corners are off, cover three. Boom, I've got the RPO right here in the slot. Or, hey, two deep safeties. This is probably cover two, light box. I can give this one off. And then they can get 5 yards on first down. And now they're in second and five. So it's less. And then the conditioning for the guys up front is a thing. I don't think it should be a big problem for CU. They have so many guys that they can rotate in and out. And now with the new sub rules in college football, you're usually able to get those guys in and out throughout a series. So I don't think that should be a big problem, but it makes teams that go tempo make the defense very basic and
Mm-hmm.
predictable at times. And that makes it so much easier for an offensive play caller to kind of get to the things that he wants to get to stay in good down and distances and you can move the ball consistently that way.
You mentioned this is going to be a really difficult challenge for Robert Livingston's 22nd total offense in the country, averaging 446.1 yards per game. And Taj Brooks is looking to have a DJ Giddens type of performance. And DJ Giddens had 182 yards against Colorado. So we'll see how they load up the box to limit him. And it's going to be a difficult challenge up front. But on the defensive line, some news there is Tyler Brown's been getting some reps at defensive line. And I saw a tweet yesterday from We Cummings Go Buffs that he is confirmed a two-way player now. So offensive lineman Tyler Brown getting some reps at DL, and maybe we'll see him on Saturday. This could be certainly a good matchup to try him in on that side up against a excuse me, a really difficult run game. Also, some
It'll help.
other injury news. Well, I guess we're at it. I mean, Tyler Brown isn't injured, but Deion Hayes had surgery last week, and we talked to Coach Prime on Tuesday, and he said that Deion Hayes is not playing this Saturday. Shane Cokes was also kind of banged up after last game, and it's still up in the air whether he'll play this Saturday. Dan Hayes, yeah, not playing this Saturday, and then Terrain Carter is also done for the year. So unfortunate news for some guys on the defensive line. And we'll see how Shane Cokes' progress looks in the coming days. Defense, as I mentioned, this Texas Tech defense has been really bad bad this year, but they're still coming out with wins. It may be highly due to their offense keeping them in games, but one thing that you mentioned before we started recording, they're a team that forces a lot of turnovers. That's what they capitalize on against Iowa State, but some opponents, some of these quarterbacks, Sawyer Robertson, 290 total yards and 5 touchdowns against Texas Tech. Josh Hoover, who leads, well, I have to check it, but last time I checked, leads the Big 12 in passing yards, 334 yards and 3 touchdowns against the Red Raiders. And Rocco Becht, Iowa State's quarterback, 300 yards and 2 touchdowns. So from these numbers and what Texas Tech secondary has been showing all year, it appears that Shedeur Sanders, a very elite quarterback, top 10 pick projected, is going to have quite a day with his receivers. And fun note that we'll all keep an eye on is Travis Hunter is 100-yard game away from setting CU's record in a single season. He currently has 5, and he needs one more. And this could likely be the game coming off a 153-yard game against Cincinnati, where Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders are firing on all cylinders. When you see this defense, as you've been watching them this year, what's surprising about them, and how have they, maybe despite their numbers this year, been better than what they look like on paper?
Well, down to down, it's not pretty. You alluded to it. The numbers are bad. The scoring defense is bad. The total defense is bad. They're outside the top 120 in both. But you mentioned the turnovers, which they do a good job of forcing. They punch at the ball. They get some interceptions. Their guys are very aggressive on the back end, getting downhill. They are at times able to get in some passing lanes and pick off some passes that way. Um, Also, their season long numbers in the red zone aren't great, but last week they were very, very good against Iowa State. They forced a bunch of field goals. I think they were up 17-13 in the second half, and they stopped Iowa State inside the 10 and forced a field goal there. They forced a field goal that was missed on the next possession. So they did a really nice job there last week to kind of stay in a game. The conditions were terrible in that game. And that was a game where their offense wasn't really humming. So that was nice complementary football for them to kind of the defense, hung on long enough to keep the offense in the game, and then the offense came down and won it at the very end. Um, so CU has to be very cognizant of protecting the football. The other thing that Texas Tech did really well last week was they got a bunch of pressure on Rocco Becht without blitzing. Becht was pressured on 43% of his dropbacks. Um, they did blitz Becht a lot. Sorry, they don't blitz a lot normally, but they did blitz Rocco Becht a lot last week. So I'm curious if that's kind of something that they try. Because I think they're going to be grasping at straws in this matchup. It's a really, really, really bad matchup for Texas Tech against this CU offense. It's pretty easy to see how CU should be able to throw the ball all over the yard, and it really starts with the guys on the outside. Texas Tech's tackling is terrible. It's really bad. They really, really struggle to get guys on the ground, on the perimeter, in the secondary. And one of the biggest strengths of this CU team is that they have guys on the outside who are playmakers after the catch. They make plays. The first guy almost never gets Travis Hunter on the ground. And if that doesn't happen in this game, based on what I've seen from this defense, the second guy may not get him on the ground, and the third guy may not either. So I expect a lot of that quick game that CU likes to do, get the ball out on the perimeter to Travis Hunter, get the ball out to Jimmy Horn. Could be a big Draylon Miller game. He's a guy that they really like in the open field. But the game plan, I think, for CU in this one starts and ends with how do we get the ball to these guys quickly and give them a chance to make plays because it is all over this Texas Tech defense's film that they really, really struggle to prevent guys from making a miss on the outside and
Hmm.
make big plays. That is really where all of these yards and points stats come from. That Texas Tech ranks near the bottom of the country. I think they're second to last in the nation in pass defense right now, just ahead of Tulsa.
Hmm.
Um, and obviously we know that, CU's run the ball a lot better this season, but that's what they like to do in the end. They like to throw the ball, and this is a matchup where they really should be able to do that all day.
Yeah, primarily Colorado is going to be deferring to the past, but we have seen some progress with Isaiah Gustave, and it looks like Coach Prime says, I think so, is going to get the nod this week. Once again, I see Jacob Rodriguez and Ben Roberts, Texas Tech's linebackers. They lead. Jacob Rodriguez leads the Big 12 in tackles with 83. He has three forced fumbles this season, and his counterpart Ben Roberts also has three forced fumbles this season. When you look at maybe the Colorado's run game up against these linebackers, their defensive front, do you think this is going to be a conducive game where Isaiah can have a positive game, or is this going to be more of a he's not maybe going to get as many looks because Colorado is going to be deferring the pass throughout this game?
I still think that he can be productive in this game. Texas Tech, unless they're sending guys, against these spread teams, they're going to be in light boxes, six-man boxes, kind of like CUC's pretty much all year. But, like the last Isaiah Gustave to be productive in this offense, he doesn't need to have 150 yards on 20 carries. Like that's just not the way that this offense is designed and the strengths of it, that's not what they're asking of him. I think he had what 22 carries for 91 in the
Mm-hmm.
last game, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's more than good enough. If you can get 4 yards a pop and, keep the offense ahead of the sticks, can you let Shador Sanders work in 3rd and 5 instead of 3rd and 10? Can you let him work in 2nd and 6 instead of 2nd and 11? Those things are the things that really, really make a big difference for this team. And you mentioned the Texas Tech linebackers; they're very good. You mentioned the forced fumbles. That's one of the ways that they get stops because they are not able to force a lot of teams into fourth down. Um, they force a lot of turnovers. So that'll be big. Augusta, obviously, he had that fumble against CSU earlier in the season. That's something to watch. He's been very good with the ball since then. He will have to be again because those guys are going to punch and rip at the ball. But I definitely think that this is a matchup where Augusta can um, can have some success on the ground. Texas Tech does mix up their fronts. They go kind of they do some even front stuff and some odd front stuff. Obviously, we've talked about how CU struggles a little bit more running the ball against odd fronts, but they did fine against Cincinnati last week, so it could have been more of a personnel thing. So that's kind of something I'm watching in this one, but I do think that it should be a solid day, if not an incredibly explosive one, for the CU running game.
Yes. Overall, it's going to be two offenses going at each other's throats and seeing which defense can stay afloat with the weapons that they have on each of their sidelines. It seems like Colorado has maybe the upper hand here with the way that their offense operates and all their wide receivers. It's just a team that, from what you said, the amount of missed tackles, the amount of yards that they allow throughout the season, it seems like Colorado has an upper hand in this, despite Texas Tech being a really productive offense on the ground. So another challenge in the run. Texas Tech is going to have a really difficult time in their secondary dealing with all the weapons and Shador Sanders. And this is a big game. I mean, it's really optimistic to think, and Colorado can do it the way that they've been playing to win out the rest of November. And getting a win in Lubbock is just will propel them to keep going throughout November. And Texas Tech has just been one of those sneaky teams in the Big 12. It's like, wow, they're better than what they've what they were projected to be. So let's do score predictions before we pivot to hoops. For this game, I mean, I've been calling CU to win, so I'm going to get CU to win here. But maybe I'll say Um, Colorado 31, Texas Tech 28. I always go around the 30 range, but it seems like this will be a fair game where Shador Sanders can find a lot of guys in the end zone. They can get some scores. There's going to be, some up and down, maybe some adjustments there. But I think, as I mentioned, Shador Sanders has the upper hand in this matchup, and Colorado is going to come out with a win despite all the tortillas or fajitas or tacos that are going to become raining down on them.
Making me hungry now.
I know I need to eat
Um,
breakfast.
I am really optimistic about this matchup for CU. I don't think that if this is kind of weird because this is the best team left on their schedule. I don't think this is going to be the most difficult game left on their schedule. I just the matchup on when CU has the football is just so it's really lopsided to me. I really think that Shador Sanders is going to have a huge day. The receivers are going to have a big day. I want to shout out Jimmy Horn too. Jimmy Horn has been so close to busting a punt return for ever since they've put him in the lineup. Baylor broke a long one. I think they got tackled at the 1 yard line on a punt return against Texas Tech a couple of weeks back. Jimmy Horn, big punt return. That's my out on a limb prediction for this one. And I'm going with CU 41, Texas Tech 27. I think that the Buffs get the job done. Another multi-score road win. It would be their fourth in a row. And I think they get the job done.
Yeah, they love playing in hostile environments. And well, they'll have the tortillas too. And they are preparing for those. Coach Prime didn't know what they were on Tuesday, but they're clarified now. They're all on the same page. They're tortillas, not fajitas, not tacos. That was my favorite moment of the press conference on Tuesday.
That
Every
was
press conference, we never know what we're gonna get, but it's always entertaining than your regular uh, head coach media presser with Coach Prime. So I'm excited. I'm excited to go to Lubbock. I hope I make it. I hope I make it there.
there until it
Um,
stops snowing.
Men's and women's hoops. They started this week. Women went up to Wyoming, played in a close one, in but came out with a win against the Cowgirls. And the Buffs played Eastern Washington, which you were there for, and I'll ask you a couple questions about it because the first half was as bad as probably bad can get. They they shot 9 of 27, 33% from the field, only made 1 of 9 of 3, and they just did not look like they were in rhythm. But in the second half, they were a little bit more productive. They got their bearings a little bit better, held Eastern Washington to 25 points, while Colorado scored 51 in the second half. So the scoring shifted, the defense was better. I guess we'll start with men's hoops. What do you think changed from the first half to the second half in that game?
Um, it felt like that they relaxed, as simple as that sound. It felt like they took a deep breath. They were really, really tight early in this game, which is totally fair. Season opener, home opener, you've got a lot of new pieces, a lot of transfers in here playing their first game in front of the Boulder crowd. I think they had 8 turnovers in the first 8 minutes, and then I think they had 13 turnovers in the first half. It was so ugly for a while. Tad Boyle after the game like couldn't even believe he was like exasperated. He couldn't even believe he was like they were just taking the ball away from us. Julian Hammond had 4 turnovers in the first half, which is very unlike him. But the second half they started to make some shots. They really started to get stops. Um, they started to play much better on defense. Eastern Washington in the first half brought in a big guy off the bench, Vice Zanke. He's Croatian. I
Mm-hmm.
might have just butchered his name, so
I think you
apologies.
got it.
Um, but he was 4 for 5 from three, like immediately when he checked in, and we were like, and it was the Eastern Washington took a 27-10 lead. CU really buckled down defensively at the end of the first half, and the offense was still kind of in the mud. But that allowed them. They cut the deficit to 6 at halftime. They came out in the second half. They really guarded well. They made some shots. They stopped turning the ball over. Only 5 turnovers in the second half. Tad Boyle made a lineup change coming out of halftime. Julian Hammond and Ben Dak both started the second half on the bench.
Mm.
Uh, it was Trevor Baskin and R.J. Smith that were that were out there. But they really the shot making and the taking care of the ball and the defense was really the big. Freshman Sebastian Ronchik was really impressive. That guy's got a really, really nice jump shot, man. He was 4 for 5 from three in this one. Led the team with 13 points off the bench in his first college action, so that was really nice to see. Um, and Tad Boyle went 11 deep in this game. I'm curious how that rotation gets trimmed. Does Harrison Carrington's minutes get cut? Felix Casares, do his minutes get cut? Um, so we'll see that as the season goes along. The other thing too, the starting lineup, I think that Trevor Baskin came off the bench in this game. I think it should be the last time that that happens. He was the best player for CU in this game. He's really active on both ends. They don't really have a guy who can consistently create his own shot. Baskin
Mhm.
is the closest thing to that. Um, and you can kind of feel him getting used to the speed of the game at this level a little bit. He was probably a little bit tight at the beginning too. Um, and he only took 4 shots from the field. He got to the free throw line 7 times, though. That's something that CU's really, really going to need. Like just
Mhm.
a guy that can create free throws, a guy that can create shots for himself. He's a big wing. He can score. He's good on defense, on and off the ball. I thought he was really active, hands in passing lanes, consistently affecting the game on the glass. Just getting tips. He had 6 rebounds in this game, which was second on the team. So he should be in the starting lineup moving forward, in my opinion. Despite a quieter scoring night, I was really impressed with him in this game.
Yeah, I was surprised when I initially saw the starting lineup because with Boyle running 11 deep and him not really telling what the starting lineup was going to be, I thought Baskin was going to start over Ruffin. And you
Hmm.
saw Ruffin took the start, and Baskin, of course, had a good game. So I feel like, as you mentioned, that is going to be moving forward. Trevor Baskin's going to get the start, but Javon Ruffin did have a good game.
Yes.
Julian Hammond also had 7 points. Javon Ruffin, 12 points, 5 of 9, over 2 from 3 pointers, and we know that he loves to shoot the three. But overall, good scoring from him, and some boosts from a guy that have we've seen in prior seasons that was coming off the bench, getting the starting nod. Positive production from him. So I think as this season goes on, the Buffs play UNC on Friday at home. What that starting line is going to look like, and yeah, every game is going to be a battle for them. But I think there's a lot of guys coming off the bench too, like you mentioned, Sebastian Ranick, that are going to be a big boost and big key players in Colorado's success this season because, as you mentioned, they just don't have a lot of guys that can create. So every game, I feel like there's going to be a new face of like, oh, either a guy off the bench or maybe someone in the starting lineup that's going to be a star within this team or at least that single game. So overall, good win. It was scary in the first half. I was texting Troy and I was like, oh, wow, this is not going well. And they turned it around significantly in the second half, but Tad Boyle, as you mentioned, was not pleased after the game. But they had a good time and they won their first game, so that's all you can ask for. Pivoting to the women in Wyoming, Lior Garzone was the star of the show up in Wyoming. She scored 20 points, 7 of 14, 1 of 4 from three, but got to the free throw line and shot 5 of 6. She is a transfer from Oklahoma State. I think with this team too is kind of how is this going to look? How is this going to operate with 10 new transfers on the team? J.R. Payne really had to pick up a lot of new faces with the amount of departures that she had. And Rita Foreman was not available in this game. She's dealing with a foot injury that's minor, but she has been wearing a boot. Kendall Wetta also fouled out of this game. She only scored 3 points. And, she is a big defensive presence, but sometimes with that can come with some foul trouble there. So we saw that in Wyoming. And Lior Garzon, as I mentioned, was the reason why Colorado really pulled this one out. Sarah Rose Smith also had 11 rebounds. She has been, a key, even last year, key player off the glass. And I talked to her at CU Women's Basketball Media Day, and she mentioned that she wanted to be that presence, the more veteran presence, and I think she's showing it a little bit more. as I mentioned, off the glass. She had 6 points, 3 of 9. The shooting was certainly fluctuating. They were down at the half against Wyoming, but in the third half, I mean, in the third quarter, they outscored them 20-10. And we were talking to Brian Howell, who went up to Wyoming on Tuesday, and Jalen Sherrod was in the building. And at half, Jalen Sherrod is like, "Come on, guys! Like, what are we doing?" And I think having Sherrod there and kind of shaking them back into reality got this good boost going. And it was still a close one. Wyoming was hanging on, and J.R. Payne certainly anticipated a tough matchup between these two. Wyoming was projected, I think, second in the preseason poll in the Mountain West, and they certainly showed their colors, finishing Colorado winning 56-50 in this one. Just from your eyes, from stat sheet, what do you think really stood out to you in this matchup, and Colorado coming out with a win in this one?
Yeah, this is a good win. It's not an easy place to start your season up in Laramie, especially when you're probably your top scorer, at least, maybe your best player, but definitely your best scorer is out. And you've got so many new pieces you're trying to gel together. So this is a good win. You know, Laramie's never easy. Just ask Tad Boyle, his favorite place up in Laramie. Great showing for Lior Garzon, as you mentioned. Really carried the team. Hit a huge jumper, mid-range jumper off the dribble late to kind of put the game out of reach, and then finished it off at the free throw line. Tabitha Betson, who was the Big 12 Freshman of the Year, she was just 1 for 9 in this game. 0 for 4 from three. I expect that to kind of turn around. They should get some scoring punch from her. Um, Obviously, the Kindle Wetta foul trouble hurts. She's kind of the vet, the point guard, kind of the experience in the room. But that is something with Kindle that she does get into foul trouble sometimes, just with the physical kind of the way that she plays so physically on defense. And that's something that I think she's going to have to be more cognizant of this year because they don't have the same guard depth with Jalen Sherrod. She's not playing behind Jalen Sherrod anymore. They need her out there 30 minutes a night. She fouled out in 24 minutes in this game, which she's got to get that kind of turned around. But it was definitely good to see Lior Garzon have such a big game. But you could really, really feel Frida Foreman's absence in this one. CU took just 10 threes. They made just one. Free throw shooting was a big problem, 13 for 24. That's not near good enough. But look, it's the first game. You're on the road. You're playing against a solid team, good Mountain West team. Um, you know, in the end, there's no pictures on the scoreboard, right? You've just got to get out of there with a win, come back home. They've got the home opener tonight against Northern Colorado, as you mentioned. So it'll be interesting to see if they're a little bit more comfortable at home, a little bit more settled in. You've got a game under your belt. See if you can come out and put a good performance out in front of the home crowd. Not sure if Frida's going to be able to go tonight. We will wait on that information. We'll find that out later in the day. You mentioned Sarah Rose Smith too, who I think is really, really big. Obviously, the 11 rebounds in this game. She had a bunch of games where she was huge on the glass last year, and that's going to be really, really, really important for CU this year because they don't have the same size that they did last year. Last year, obviously, they had the massive front line of Quay Miller, Aaron Von Lay, Charlotte Whitaker comes in off the bench. That's a lot of bigs. CU doesn't have the same size this year. So even though Sarah Smith's more of kind of a wing archetype, she's probably the best rebounder on the team. And she is going to have to be kind of the equalizer on the glass because CU is going to be smaller than a lot of the teams that they're going to play against. So that is going to be really, really vital for them this year.
Certainly. And as you mentioned, you'll be at the game tonight, the women's game, and I will be covering the men's game on Friday from Lubbock. Should be a good one. Also, going back to men's really quick, there's some news that came out on Wednesday that Andrew Crawford is opting for red shirts, so he will not be. I think Tad Boyle is going to be selective in where they play them, but it's a long season. You only get a handful of games, so he'll be taking a red shirt. And yeah, hoops, exciting. We're learning every game. We're learning a little bit more about this team and these first games. We saw some good. We definitely saw some bad, but both came out with a win. And yeah, many more games ahead. Those are my final notes from me. Like I said, it's snowing. Lubbock, never been there before. It's going to be certainly not easy to get there, but hopefully, with all the trials and tribulations, Colorado can come out the win. And I'm excited to see the environment. I love Texas football, especially after I went to TCU last year. It's just different, like the South and the the hospitality and just they'll probably let the Jimmy Horn peace sign go. The refs down there, I think. There won't be
Everyone
any
should let the Jimmy
taunting.
Ward peace sign go. Stop calling taunting in sports. Stop it.
Yeah, but those are all my notes for me. Troy and I are dealing with the 49ers and Seahawks and the Cardinals being the top of the division, but other than that, I'm doing okay. I'm 1-7 in fantasy, and I refuse to fix anything about that. So that's all
Seahawks.
for me. We'll see you guys next time on another episode of C Sports World Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Bye. You always get the confetti. I never get
Hey.
the confetti.